I'm Judge Lauren Lake, and in my 43 years sitting on this bench, I have witnessed just about everything a courtroom can offer. I have watched grown men weep. I have watched others try to bargain their way out with lawyers whispering in their ear. I have watched some rage until the bailiff had to step forward, and a rare few actually look me in the eye and speak the truth. But never, not once in 4 decades did I imagine someone wearing a badge would march into my courtroom and attempt to have me placed in handcuffs. That morning arrived on a bitter Tuesday in February, and what unfolded afterward became one of the most talked about events in the history of Providence's courthouse. Let me take you into that morning the way I lived it. It began like any other day on the bench. I walked into my courtroom at precisely 8:45 a.m., coffee in one hand, the worn leather folder my father gave me the day I was sworn in as a judge tucked under my other arm. The moment I pushed through those doors, I felt it. Something was different. The room was packed well beyond capacity. People lined up along every wall, standing in the aisles, spilling almost into the hallway. In 43 years, you learn to read a room before a single word is spoken, and that room told me something unusual was coming. My clerk, Sandra, caught my eye as I settled into my chair. She leaned in close and told me quietly that we had a special matter that morning, case number 77349. I scanned my docket and found a name, James Richardson, 52 years old, facing charges of contempt of court and obstruction of justice. On paper, contempt cases rarely get complicated. Someone disrespects a judge, ignores a court order, that's usually the shape of it. But when I lifted my eyes from the page and looked out over my courtroom, I had to look twice. James Richardson was no ordinary defendant standing at that table. He was the police commissioner of Providence, the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the entire city. Let me describe him to you, because appearance tells you something about a man before he ever opens his mouth. He stood before me in a tailored navy suit that likely cost close to $3,000. His tie was knotted with surgical precision, a fine geometric pattern catching the light even from where I sat, elevated on the bench. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. On his wrist sat a Rolex Presidential that flashed with every small, deliberate movement of his hand. This was a man who wore his wealth and his authority like armor, and he wanted to make absolutely certain no one in that room could miss it. Beside him stood his attorney, Marcus Webb, the kind of high-priced defense lawyer who has built an entire career shielding the wealthy and the politically connected. Marcus arrived in a charcoal suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than a working family's monthly rent. Both men wore the same silent expression on their faces, the look of two people who genuinely believe they operate on a different plane of existence than everyone else seated in that room. On the opposite side of the aisle stood Assistant District Attorney Lisa Chen, 34 years old, 6 years with the DA's office, and one of the sharpest, most prepared prosecutors I had worked with in a long time. But that morning she looked unsettled. Her hands moved restlessly across her papers. I noticed the faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, despite the cool air pumping through the vents. That told me, before a single word of testimony, that this case ran far deeper than its docket entry let on. I called the room to order. I greeted everyone the way I always do. And then I asked Lisa to explain to me why the city's top law enforcement officer was standing in my courtroom as a defendant. She took a long breath. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied as she found her footing. She told me that 3 weeks earlier, on January 14th, at roughly 2:30 in the afternoon, Commissioner Richardson had deliberately inserted himself into an active criminal investigation. She said he had used his authority to intimidate witnesses and threaten the very officers running that case, a case involving his own nephew. His own nephew. I straightened in my chair and told her to keep going because I needed to hear every detail. Lisa explained that Richardson's nephew, 23-year-old Brandon Richardson, had been arrested on charges of assault and battery. The victim was a military veteran named Michael Torres, 41 years old, who had served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. He came home carrying PTSD and a permanent leg injury that left him with a visible limp for the rest of his life. He'd taken a job as a hospital security guard to support his wife and 3 children, the youngest of whom, a 7-year-old daughter, was actively undergoing leukemia treatment at the very hospital where her father clocked in every shift. According to the police report, Brandon Richardson crossed paths with Michael outside a bar on Westminster Street. Michael was walking home after a long, late shift, exhausted, just trying to get to his car. It was 11:20 at night. Brandon was heavily intoxicated and had spent the entire evening documenting himself on Instagram. Clips of him and his friends doing shots of premium tequila priced around $300 a bottle. In one video, he fanned out a thick roll of cash for the camera and laughed about how his uncle would always make his problems disappear, no matter what he did. The confrontation started when Michael accidentally brushed against Brandon on the sidewalk. Michael apologized immediately. He was that kind of man, measured, respectful, the sort who extends courtesy without needing a reason to. Brandon wanted none of it. 3 separate eyewitnesses confirmed that he started hurling insults, mocking Michael's limp, calling him degrading names and shoving him hard enough to knock him to the ground. Michael tried to walk away. He wanted no part of a fight. He'd already given enough of himself overseas. But Brandon followed him, kept pushing, kept provoking, until finally Michael stopped, turned around, and calmly told him to back off. That is the exact moment Brandon threw the first punch. Not once, 7 times. Witnesses said he kept swinging until Michael was unconscious on the pavement, his blood pooling on the sidewalk. Michael was rushed to the hospital with a fractured jaw, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and further permanent damage to the leg he had already carried home from a war zone. Police arrested Brandon that same night. The evidence against him was overwhelming. 3 witnesses on record, security footage from the bar, and Brandon's own social media showing him drunk and menacing hours before the attack. By every normal measure, this should have been a simple, straightforward prosecution. Then the commissioner showed up. He arrived at the police station at 1:15 in the morning, demanding his nephew's immediate release. When the officers on duty refused, he threatened them directly. He told them their careers were finished. He said he would personally make sure they never worked in law enforcement again, anywhere. Officer Patricia Morales, badge number 3472, was the one who stood her ground that night. A single mother raising 2 children on her own, 9 years on the Providence Police Department, a spotless record, and on the verge of a promotion she had earned the hard way. When she refused to release Brandon Richardson, the commissioner pulled her into a private room. He told her that if she didn't drop the charges, he would personally see to it that her career ended. He threatened to plant evidence in her locker. He told her he would tear her reputation apart piece by piece until there was nothing left. Patricia recorded every second of it on her phone. She knew exactly what she was doing and exactly what it would cost her if it went wrong. Without that recording, it would come down to her word against the commissioner's, and she understood perfectly well how that equation tends to play out for people without power. So she let the phone run. 8 uninterrupted minutes of threats, and then she carried that recording directly to the district attorney's office. That is how we all ended up in my courtroom that morning. The police commissioner of Providence standing before me charged with witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and abuse of authority. And he did not look the least bit concerned. He looked irritated, the way you look when you feel an appointment is beneath you. His attorney rose and addressed the court, calling the whole matter a misunderstanding. He claimed Commissioner Richardson had simply been trying to make sure his nephew was treated fairly by the system. He argued that Officer Morales had misread the commissioner's tone and intentions. And then he said something that genuinely made my blood pressure climb right there on the bench. He accused the district attorney's office of running a coordinated political attack against his client. I let him finish every single word. I always do. Then I asked for the recording to be played for the entire courtroom. Lisa Chen connected her device to our audio system. Commissioner Richardson's voice filled that room, clear and unmistakable, with no static and no ambiguity to hide behind. He had threatened Officer Morales in precise, explicit language, describing in detail exactly how he intended to dismantle her life if she refused to comply. When the recording ended, not one person in that courtroom made a sound. You could have heard a pin drop on that marble floor. I looked at Commissioner Richardson and asked if he wished to respond. He smiled. He actually smiled at me. Then he said he stood fully behind every single word captured on that recording. He said Officer Morales was a subordinate employee who should have followed his instructions without question. He said that as commissioner, he had the authority to decide which arrests moved forward in this city and which quietly did not. Now let me ask you something directly, because I want to know. If you believe no one gets a free pass from accountability simply because they hold a title or wear a nice suit, drop that in the comments right now and tell me what you would have done sitting in my seat. And if you still haven't subscribed to this channel, this is the moment to do it, because this channel is built on one simple idea, that justice is real, and we are only just getting started. I settled back in my chair and let his admission hang there in the air for a long moment. I wanted every single person in that room to feel the full weight of what he had just confessed to, on the record in front of a packed courtroom. He had acknowledged threatening a sworn officer of the law. He had acknowledged trying to obstruct a criminal prosecution involving a brutal assault. And he had delivered that admission with a grin on his face, like it cost him nothing. But I was nowhere near finished with him. I asked Lisa Chen if she had additional evidence. She did. She lifted a thick stack of documents from the prosecution table and told the court that after Officer Morales came forward, 3 additional officers had independently reached out to the district attorney's office on their own, without coordination. Each one described the same pattern. Commissioner Richardson using his position to shield politically connected individuals and personal associates from prosecution. One officer testified under oath that he'd been ordered to alter the contents of an official police report. A second officer said she'd been instructed to destroy physical evidence in a case involving a city councilman's son. A third described what she called a shadow arrangement operating inside the department, a private tier of protection reserved exclusively for people with the right last name or the right connections. That stack of papers held sworn affidavits from all 3 officers, along with a collection of internal department emails documenting Commissioner Richardson's conduct across a span of years, a minimum of 15 separate incidents where he had either derailed an active investigation or punished an officer who refused to look the other way. I looked back at him. The smile was gone. What replaced it was not remorse. It was rage, plain and unfiltered. His face had gone a deep mottled red. His jaw was locked so tight I could see the muscle working in his cheek. And then he did something that changed the entire atmosphere of that room in an instant. He rose to his feet and leveled a finger directly at me, up on my own bench. He told me, with all due respect, that I was operating far outside my depth. He called me a small-time judge who had gotten lucky with some internet attention. He said I had neither the authority nor the standing to sit in judgment of a man like him. He said he had devoted his entire career to protecting this city, and that using his influence to protect his own family was, in his words, exactly what power was for. The courtroom broke apart. Voices erupted from every corner of the room. My bailiff called out for order. I struck my gavel 3 times, hard, and gradually the room went quiet again. I looked at Commissioner Richardson and asked him plainly whether he was finished. He said he was not. He told me I was a performance, not a real judge. He said I carried no actual weight behind my robe, that I was nothing more than a television personality dressed up in a costume. And then he said the one thing I will carry with me for the rest of my time on this bench. He said he knew exactly what separated a man like him from a woman like me. He came from real money, real influence, generations of it. He said I was the daughter of an immigrant who spent his entire life on a factory floor. He called me working class like it was an insult. He told me that no matter what robe I wore, underneath it I was still just a kid from a blue-collar neighborhood, pretending to belong in rooms that were built for people like him. That was it. That was the exact moment everything crystallized for me. I have absorbed insults in that courtroom before, plenty of them, over 4 decades. But this one was not aimed only at me. It was aimed at my father. My father, who arrived in this country with almost nothing in his pockets and worked 16-hour shifts on a factory floor so that his family could build a life worth living. My father, who taught me, without ever using fancy words for it, that every human being carries inherent dignity regardless of what they earn or where they were born. I rose from my chair. I looked Commissioner Richardson directly in the eye without flinching, and I told him to sit down and remain silent. His attorney grabbed his arm and pulled him back into his seat. Then I turned to Lisa Chen and asked her, quietly this time, what else she had for me.
She picked up her phone and mirrored it to the courtroom monitor above the jury box. The screen filled with a screenshot pulled from the commissioner's personal Instagram account posted just 2 weeks earlier. He was seated in what looked like a private members club, a glass of whiskey in hand, flanked by 2 city councilmen and a state senator, all of them laughing at something out of frame. The caption underneath it read, "Another productive week looking after our interests. Most people don't understand how things really work." I want you to sit with that for a second, because I want you to see exactly where this is headed. But before I tell you what came next, do something for me first. If you believe justice belongs to everyone and not only to the people who can afford to buy it, hit that like button right now, wherever you're watching this from. Lisa moved to the next screenshot. This one was a private message thread between Commissioner Richardson and his nephew, sent the very morning after Brandon's arrest. Brandon had written that he'd made a serious mistake, that he had genuinely hurt someone badly. The commissioner's reply was brief and ice cold. "Don't give it another thought," he wrote. "He'd take care of everything." And then, referring to Michael Torres, a man who had served his country and was now fighting to keep his sick daughter alive, the commissioner called him a crippled nobody who doesn't matter. The courtroom went completely still. You could feel the temperature of the room drop. Lisa wasn't finished, though. She showed another exchange. Brandon had written that the officers were still pressing the investigation, that the female officer wouldn't let it go. The commissioner replied that he would deal with her personally, that he would destroy everything she had built if he had to, and that she, too, was just another nobody. Then Lisa presented something that genuinely lit a fire in me, right there on the bench. It was a TikTok video posted publicly by Brandon Richardson just 3 days before this hearing. He was at a party, surrounded by expensive bottles and loud music, laughing and dancing without a care in the world. The text overlaid on the video read, "When you put someone in the hospital and your uncle erases the whole thing. Money and power, baby. Rules are for people without either." That video had racked up more than 43,000 views, and sitting right there in the comments section, posted from Commissioner Richardson's own verified account, was this: "That's my nephew. Family always comes first. We don't operate under the same rules as everyone else." I looked at him. All the color had drained from his face. He stood anyway and announced that his accounts had been hacked, that someone was orchestrating an elaborate setup against him. I told him to sit down. Then I turned back to Lisa and asked whether the district attorney's office had confirmed the authenticity of this evidence. She confirmed they had. Digital forensic specialists had traced every message and every post directly back to devices registered in Commissioner Richardson's own name. Then Lisa laid out the final piece of what she had. In the course of their investigation, prosecutors had uncovered something that stretched far beyond this single case sitting in front of me. Commissioner Richardson had been operating what amounted to a protection scheme for years, accepting payments from wealthy, influential individuals in exchange for keeping them out of the criminal justice system entirely. Bank records showed deposits exceeding $2 million across 5 years, routed into offshore accounts under his personal control. The FBI had already opened a federal investigation covering corruption, money laundering, and racketeering. Federal agents had been preparing to move on him within the coming week. His appearance in my courtroom that morning was a preemptive move, an attempt to get ahead of the local process before federal authorities could close in. But by then, the window had already shut. As Lisa laid out these final details, the rear doors of my courtroom swung open. 3 people walked in, 2 federal agents and a woman in a sharply fitted business suit who introduced herself as Assistant United States Attorney Jennifer Morrison. She informed the court that Commissioner Richardson was the subject of an active federal investigation covering multiple serious crimes. Then the doors opened a second time. A man in a full police uniform stepped inside, Chief Deputy Commissioner Anthony Rizzo, the second highest ranking officer in the entire Providence Police Department. Everyone in that room, myself included for a brief second, assumed he had come to defend his boss. Instead, he walked straight past the defense table to the prosecution side and asked my permission to address the court. I granted it. Chief Rizzo told me he had spent 29 years with the Providence Police Department and he could no longer stay silent while this went on. He said Commissioner Richardson had hollowed out the department's integrity from the inside, that good officers lived in genuine fear, afraid to do their jobs properly because they knew the commissioner would come after them personally if they ever arrested someone he wanted protected. He said the commissioner had tried to pull him into the scheme as well, offering him money and career advancement in exchange for his silence and cooperation. Chief Rizzo refused. And after that refusal, the commissioner began quietly working to push him out of the department entirely. But Chief Rizzo had been documenting everything the whole time. Internal emails, recorded phone calls, a detailed personal journal logging every incident as it happened. He handed a thick folder over to Lisa Chin. Then he turned to face Commissioner Richardson directly, and he said, "Jim, I genuinely respected you once, but you have never cared about anyone but yourself. You have betrayed every single officer who laces up their boots and pins on that badge every morning. You are a disgrace to this department." That was when Commissioner Richardson finally came apart completely. He shot to his feet, shouting that he was being conspired against, that this entire proceeding was a coordinated attack. And then he made the mistake that sealed his fate for good. He turned to me and announced that he was having me arrested, that I was biased, that I was acting in bad faith. He pulled out his phone right there in open court, called the police department, and ordered officers to come to the courthouse and take me into custody. I did not move from my bench. I let him make the call. I let every word of it play out in front of the entire courtroom. When he ended the call, I asked him, calmly, whether he was satisfied. He told me that within minutes, officers would arrive and remove me from my own courtroom. We waited 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The doors did not open. He called again, agitated now, his voice rising. Whatever the person on the other end of that call told him drained every remaining trace of color from his face. The entire department had declined to carry out his order. They no longer recognized his authority. Chief Rizzo, it turned out, had already reached the mayor's office and the city council, who had convened an emergency session and voted immediately to suspend Commissioner Richardson from his position, effective at once. His badge was gone. His authority was gone. Every shield he had used to protect himself for years was stripped away in a single unanimous vote. At that exact moment, 2 Providence police officers walked through the doors of my courtroom. They had not come for me. They had come for him. One of those 2 officers was Patricia Morales. She stepped forward, looked him directly in the eye and said, "James Richardson, you are under arrest for witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, corruption, and abuse of authority." I will carry the expression on his face in that moment for the rest of my life. Every trace of arrogance had evaporated completely. What remained was something far simpler and far more human: fear. He looked around that courtroom, searching desperately for anyone who might step in on his behalf. Not one single person moved. We are close to the end of this story now, and if you have made it this far with me, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Before I tell you the sentence I handed down that morning, hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. More moments where the system actually delivers what it was designed to deliver instead of quietly failing the people it's supposed to protect. Officer Morales placed the handcuffs on Commissioner Richardson's wrist. As she did, I spoke directly to him one final time from the bench. I told him that in 4 decades on this bench, I had never once encountered anyone who carried himself with the kind of brazen, open contempt for accountability that he had shown me that morning. I told him he had violated the public's trust in the most fundamental way a person in his position possibly could. He had corroded an entire police department from the inside out. He had terrorized good officers who were only trying to do their jobs. He had shielded a violent criminal simply because that criminal shared his last name. And he had done all of it without a single visible flicker of genuine regret. I found him guilty of criminal contempt of court. I found him guilty of witness intimidation. I found him guilty of obstruction of justice. I sentenced him to 1 full year in jail, no bail, effective immediately, right there in that courtroom. But that was not the complete picture, and it was never going to be. I ordered him to pay full restitution to Officer Patricia Morales. I ordered him to cover every single medical expense that Michael Torres incurred as a direct result of the assault. And I ordered him to deliver a formal public apology to every officer serving in the Providence Police Department, in person, not through a press release written by a lawyer. Then I added something I had never once included in a sentence before in 43 years on the bench. Upon his release, he would be required to complete 1,000 hours of community service at the very VA hospital where Michael Torres worked every day. He would work side by side with veterans every single shift with no exceptions and no shortcuts. He would be forced to face repeatedly and in person the exact kind of people his nephew had brutalized on that sidewalk, and the exact kind of people he himself had dismissed as disposable in his own private messages. I asked Officer Morales to step up to the bench. I thanked her in front of that entire packed room for the courage it had taken to walk that recording into the district attorney's office, knowing exactly what it might cost her. I told her she embodied everything law enforcement is genuinely supposed to stand for. She had tears in her eyes and told me quietly that she was just doing her job. But it was more than that, and we both knew it. She had put her entire career on the line because it was the right thing to do, and she had done it without a moment's hesitation. I also called Michael Torres forward. He had been sitting quietly in the back of that room through the entire proceeding, saying nothing, taking it all in. He walked toward the bench slowly, his limp marking every single step across that courtroom floor. I told him I was deeply, personally sorry for what had been done to him. I told him the city would be taking full responsibility for all of his medical costs, and that I would personally make sure his daughter had access to the very best possible care for her treatment, whatever that took. Michael broke down right there in front of me. He told me he honestly had not expected justice to reach him at all. Once he'd learned who had attacked him, he assumed the whole thing would quietly disappear the way these things sometimes do, and that he'd be left alone to deal with the consequences. He had not been forgotten. The case made national news by that same evening. Every major outlet picked it up within hours. Footage of Commissioner Richardson's arrest inside my own courtroom spread across the internet and reached millions of viewers by the next morning. 2 weeks after sentencing, the FBI formally arrested him on federal charges: racketeering, money laundering, and corruption, facing up to 20 years in a federal facility. His nephew Brandon, stripped of the protection that had insulated him from real consequences his entire life, entered a guilty plea and received a 3-year sentence of his own. Officer Patricia Morales was promoted to sergeant and later advanced again to lieutenant. Chief Anthony Rizzo was appointed the new police commissioner of Providence, and he has spent every day since working to rebuild trust between that department and the people it's supposed to serve. Michael Torres made a full recovery from his injuries. His daughter's leukemia went into remission not long after. He still reports for his shift at that hospital every single day, walking those same halls where his daughter is treated. If this story reminded you that accountability still means something in this country, even for the people who think they're above it, make sure you're subscribed before you go. This channel is where these stories live, and I promise you there are plenty more like it still to come.